3 years ago, I had the perfect life. I was a 28-year-old software engineer with a six-figure salary, a beautiful girlfriend, and the most loyal best friend anyone could ask for. My name is Jake, and I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I came from. I lived in a two-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle, drove a BMW that I'd saved up for, and had just gotten promoted to senior developer at a tech startup that was about to go public. I thought I had it all figured out. I was making $120,000 a year, had been with my girlfriend Sarah for 5 years, and my best friend Marcus had been by my side since college. We were planning a trip to Europe that summer. I was saving for a house, and life felt like it was just beginning for me. I was 28 and felt like I was on top of the world. Today, I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom. Yes, I had to move back in with my mom after losing everything, holding a yellowed letter that proves my entire life has been one giant lie. And the person who destroyed me, my best friend Marcus, who I trusted with my life, my secrets, and my money. I'm surrounded by cardboard boxes, wearing clothes I bought at Goodwill, and living on ramen noodles and my mother's leftover dinners. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. Marcus wasn't the real villain at all. He was just a pawn in someone else's game, and I was too blind to see it until it was too late. The real enemy had been sitting at my dinner table for 30 years, calling himself my father. Let me take you back to where it all started falling apart. I thought I had the perfect friendship with Marcus. We met in college during our sophomore year, both of us studying computer science. He was the kind of guy who remembered everyone's birthday, showed up to support you during tough times, and celebrated your victories like they were his own. We were inseparable for 10 years, through college, through our first jobs, through my engagement to Sarah. He was there when I got my first job at Microsoft, when I proposed to Sarah at Pike Place Market, when I decided to quit my safe job to start my own tech company. He even helped me write my business plan and introduce me to investors. Marcus had become family to me. I trusted him with my bank login information when I was out of town. I let him borrow money without asking questions, and I shared my deepest fears and dreams with him. But then things started getting weird around 2 years ago. Marcus began acting strange, always making excuses to visit my apartment when Sarah wasn't home. He'd ask weird questions about my parents, my childhood, things he already knew. He'd want to know about family photos, old letters, anything that might be in storage. At the time, I thought he was just being nosy, maybe trying to write a family history as a gift for me. Then he started borrowing money, first 100 here, then 500 there. Just until my next paycheck, he'd say, "Can you spot me for this?" I never said no because he was family to me. We'd split dinner checks, share rides, and I had plenty of money to spare. Looking back now, I realize he was testing boundaries, seeing how much he could take before I'd say no. The breaking point came in March of last year when Sarah found credit card statements in my name for things I never bought. Expensive watches, designer clothes, dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, even a $3,000 hotel stay in Portland. The bank said I had authorized the charges through their app, but I didn't remember doing that. I had never downloaded that specific banking app, and I certainly never made those purchases. Sarah was devastated. "How could you do this to us?" she cried. "How could you lie about spending money on other women?" I was just as confused as she was. I spent hours on the phone with the bank, trying to explain that I never made these purchases. They said the IP address matched my phone, the security questions were answered correctly, and the purchases were made using my biometric data. My business partner Tom sued me for embezzling $47,000 from our company account. He had evidence of transfers that I supposedly made to personal accounts. I had to prove in court that I was at a conference in San Francisco when those transfers occurred, and even then, I had to pay Tom back before I could get my legal fees back. The stress of the lawsuit, combined with the credit card fraud, destroyed my credit score and my business reputation. Marcus disappeared without a trace the day after the lawsuit was filed. I called him, texted him, even went to his apartment, but he was gone. His lease was up, His stuff was moved out and his phone went straight to voicemail. He left no forwarding address, no explanation, nothing. I lost everything: my company, my girlfriend, my savings, and my trust in human nature. Sarah moved out of our apartment and took most of her belongings. My car was repossessed because I couldn't make the payments. I had to sell my furniture to pay my lawyer. My parents, who I'd always been proud to support with my success, had to help me financially for the first time since I'd become an adult. But there was one detail that didn't make sense, and it nagged at me constantly. The credit card receipts showed purchases made in a city 200 miles away from where I lived, on dates when I was at work. I had receipts and witnesses for those days. I was at the office, working late, attending meetings, and I had security camera footage from our building to prove it. So how could I have made these purchases? I spent months trying to figure out how someone could have used my identity so perfectly. They knew my security questions, had access to my phone, and even had my biometric data. It felt like I was being haunted by a ghost version of myself that I couldn't catch or understand. With nowhere left to go, I moved back into my mom's house. She was kind about it, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes every time she looked at me. I was 28 years old, living in my childhood bedroom, unemployed and completely broken. The same room where I'd done homework and dreamed about my future was now where I lived as a failure. I couldn't get hired anywhere. My credit was destroyed, my reputation was in tatters, and potential employers saw a guy who had allegedly embezzled money and committed identity fraud. I applied to dozens of jobs and got rejected from all of them. Even entry-level positions seemed out of reach. That's when I decided to clean out my old closet. I hadn't been in there since I was 16, and it was filled with old school papers, report cards, and birthday cards. I was looking for a charger I thought I might have left up there when I found boxes of old school papers, report cards, and birthday cards. In the very back, behind a dusty photo album of my high school graduation, I discovered a hidden compartment in the wall that I'd never seen before. My hands were shaking as I pulled out an old shoebox that I'd never seen before. The box was wrapped in plastic and had been there for years, probably decades. Inside was a letter addressed to my mother, dated just a month before I was born. But it wasn't from my dad, my real dad. The letter was from a man named David Chen, and it said, "I know I can't be part of his life, but please tell Jake someday that he has my eyes, and I hope he builds the life I never could." But that wasn't all. The box also contained a birth certificate that was different from the one I'd always known. It showed David Chen as my biological father, not Robert Martinez, the man who had raised me. There were also old photographs of David, a brilliant-looking man with the same dark hair and green eyes that I had. The resemblance was unmistakable. I found medical records showing that David had died in a car accident when I was 3 years old. There were also documents showing that he had been a brilliant scientist who had worked for a major pharmaceutical company. He had several patents registered in his name, including one for a diabetes treatment that was still generating millions in royalties. My whole world was turning upside down. The man I'd called Dad my whole life wasn't my biological father. My real father was a scientist who had died young, and apparently he had left behind valuable intellectual property that I had never known about. The letter revealed that my real father wasn't the man who raised me. My mom had had a brief relationship with David Chen, a brilliant scientist, before she married my stepfather Robert. David had died in a car accident when I was 3, but my mom had kept his identity secret to protect me from the family drama that would have followed. But that wasn't the only secret the letter revealed. David had left behind research and patents that were worth millions. He had been working on revolutionary treatments for diabetes and had several pending patents that were later developed into profitable drugs. The letter mentioned that there were legal documents and financial records that my mother should have received after David's death, but she had never mentioned any of this to me. I confronted my mother that evening. She broke down crying and told me the whole story. She had met David at a conference in 1995. They had a brief but intense relationship, and she became pregnant. David wanted to be part of our lives, but his family was wealthy and traditional, and they threatened to disown him if he married her. He died before they could work out the details of co-parenting. My mom had been with Robert for 2 years when she got pregnant with me. When David died, Robert stepped in and raised me as his own son. He was a good man, a construction worker who loved me and provided for me, but he had also been lying to me my entire life. But that wasn't the full truth either. The letter also mentioned that David had left behind a trust fund for me, as well as the rights to his patents. My mom told me that Robert had convinced her to keep my real parentage secret so that I wouldn't have to deal with David's wealthy family. But now I wondered if there was more to the story. I did some research and found that David's patents were still generating money. The diabetes treatment alone had made millions for the pharmaceutical company that had bought the rights. There was a trust fund set up for me that had been collecting interest for 28 years. The total amount was over $2.3 million. But my stepfather Robert had known about this all along. He had convinced my mother to hide my true identity so he could control David's inheritance. He had been living off the money from David's patents while raising me as his own son, never telling me that I was the heir to a small fortune. Marcus hadn't been stealing from me randomly. He was working for my stepfather, who had hired him to destroy my reputation and financial stability so I couldn't afford to investigate my family history. The identity theft, the missing money, the broken relationships, it was all orchestrated to keep me too distracted and broke to uncover the truth. My stepfather had been living a double life for 30 years, raising me as his son while secretly controlling my real father's fortune. He had been using David's money to support our family while pretending to be my real father. Every Christmas gift, every birthday party, every college fund payment had been paid for with money that belonged to me. The evidence was overwhelming when I started looking for it. Bank records showed my stepfather had been accessing David's accounts for 30 years. The pharmaceutical company had been sending checks to my mother's address, but my stepfather had been cashing them. Phone records I found showed he had been in contact with Marcus throughout my entire downfall. The man who raised me, who I'd called Dad my whole life, had been systematically destroying my life to protect his own financial empire. Marcus, it turned out, had been blackmailed into helping. My stepfather had discovered that Marcus's own father had been involved in tax evasion and was facing prison time. My stepfather had offered to pay for a good lawyer and help get Marcus's father out of trouble if Marcus would help him keep me from discovering my real identity and inheritance. When Marcus realized what he'd done, he tried to warn me, but my stepfather had already cut off all communication between us. I used David's research and patents to hire a private investigator and a lawyer, with the help of my childhood friend Lisa. Yes, the same girl who sat behind me in 3rd grade who had become a successful lawyer. We built a case against my stepfather. Lisa had always been brilliant, and seeing her succeed while I was failing made me realize how much potential I'd let slip away. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed my stepfather had been accessing David's accounts for 30 years. The pharmaceutical company had been sending royalty checks to my mother's address, but my stepfather had been cashing them and depositing them into accounts I didn't know existed. Phone records proved he had been in contact with Marcus throughout my entire downfall, giving him specific instructions on how to destroy my reputation and financial stability. We also found emails between my stepfather and Marcus, showing how they had planned the identity theft and the embezzling from my business. My stepfather had taught Marcus how to hack into my accounts and use my biometric data. He had provided Marcus with my security questions and passwords, which my stepfather had somehow obtained over the years. The worst part was learning that my stepfather had been watching me my entire life, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had been afraid that as I got older and more successful, I might start asking questions about my family history. When I decided to start my own company and started talking about my dreams and ambitions, he knew I might eventually investigate my background and discover the truth. My stepfather Robert went to prison for fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and tax evasion. He was sentenced to 15 years, and he'll be in his 70s when he gets out. The money he had stolen from David's estate was returned to me, plus interest and damages. I also received the trust fund that had been growing for 28 years, bringing my total inheritance to over $3.2 million. Marcus, it turned out, had been a victim too. My stepfather had threatened to expose Marcus's father's tax evasion if he didn't cooperate. Marcus's father had been involved in a construction company that had been under investigation for years. My stepfather had used this information to blackmail Marcus into helping him. When Marcus realized what he'd done, he tried to warn me, but my stepfather had already cut off all communication between us and convinced me that Marcus was the real enemy. Sarah and I are friends now, and she's actually dating Marcus. She told me that when she saw how broken Marcus was after what had happened, she realized that he was just as much a victim as I was. They're planning to get married next year, and Marcus is working with a therapist to deal with the guilt and trauma of what he'd done. He's also working with me to help other people who have been victims of identity theft and financial fraud. Now I'm running a tech company built on my real father's research. I've reconnected with David's side of the family, and I've learned that I'm not just an engineer. I'm a scientist who inherited my real father's genius for innovation. His research in biotechnology and pharmaceutical development has helped me create new applications and software that are revolutionizing how medical research is conducted. I've also started a foundation in David's name to help other people who have been victims of identity theft and financial fraud. It's called the David Chen Foundation for Financial Justice, and we provide legal assistance and financial support to people who have been targeted by the kind of elaborate schemes that destroyed my life. I bought a new house, not as expensive as my old one, but comfortable and paid for with my own money. I have a new car, and I'm engaged to someone new, a woman named Emma who I met at a tech conference. She knows my story and loves me for who I am now, not for what I used to have. Looking back, I realized that losing everything forced me to discover who I really was beneath all the false success and fake relationships. My real father's legacy wasn't just his money or his research. It was the curiosity and determination that led me to uncover the truth, even when everyone told me to give up. I learned that the people who love you don't try to control your life or keep you from your destiny. They support your dreams and help you become the best version of yourself. My stepfather may have raised me, but he never loved me enough to let me be who I was meant to be. I also learned that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are also victims themselves. Marcus didn't want to betray me, but he was trapped by circumstances beyond his control. Forgive, but don't forget, and always try to understand the whole story before you judge someone. The experience taught me to question everything and everyone, but not to become paranoid or bitter. It's important to trust people, but also to protect yourself and stay aware of your surroundings. If something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. I'm grateful for what happened, as strange as that sounds. If my stepfather hadn't tried to destroy me to protect his secret, I never would have discovered my real identity or my true potential. I would have lived my whole life as someone else's creation instead of becoming who I was meant to be. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads you exactly where you need to be. I lost my old life, but I found my real self. I lost my fake family, but I found my real family. I lost my superficial success, but I gained authentic achievement. The person I was 3 years ago, the successful but naive software engineer, doesn't exist anymore. In his place is someone stronger, wiser, and more determined. Someone who knows that the truth is worth fighting for, even when it hurts. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was hiding something important from you? How did you handle finding out the truth? Did it change your life in ways you didn't expect? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.